Chapter 3. Good Manufacturing Practices and Other Prerequisite Programs for Preventive Controls for Human Food. The Food Safety Plan is not a standalone program, but rather part of a larger food safety system. The foundational programs that are part of the food safety system are frequently termed prerequisite programs. The term was coined to indicate that they should be in place before HACCP-based systems are implemented in order to effectively manage risk from foodborne hazards. The current Good Manufacturing Practice (GMP) regulations address requirements for many prerequisite programs. There are other programs that are likely to apply to most facilities, such as supplier and manufacturing specifications. In this chapter you will learn the definition of prerequisite programs and their importance in a food safety system. An overview of GMP requirements is provided. However, further reading or training is important to ensure that you understand these foundational programs and the regulatory requirements. You will also learn about other prerequisite programs that may be important for your facility. Prerequisite programs provide the basic environmental and operating conditions that are necessary to support the food safety plan, and in some cases these programs will be part of the food safety plan. Many of these programs are required by regulation, e.g., GMPs. The specific prerequisite programs required may vary depending on the type of food produced and the facility where it is processed or held. Some people use the terms prerequisite program, GMP, CGMP, C stands for Current Good Hygienic Practice, and Sanitation Standard Operating Procedures interchangeably. The important thing to remember is that these are foundational programs included in an overall food safety system. Without these programs, the food safety plan may not successfully prevent food safety issues. Remember that the food safety plan focuses on what matters most to ensure the safety of the food being produced. Let's take a look at some important definitions. First, prerequisite program, procedures, including good manufacturing practices. GMPs, that provide the basic environmental and operating conditions necessary to support the food safety plan. And food safety system, the outcome of implementing the food safety plan and its supporting elements. Remember, your goal is to build a system. This is not a comprehensive discussion of GMP requirements. Certain regulatory requirements are addressed in Chapter 16, Regulation Overview. Regulations are provided in 21 CFR 117 Subpart B in Appendix 1. You can find this in the chapter resources. GMPs are federal regulations that apply to all facilities that manufacture, process, pack, or hold FDA-regulated food. GMPs are the basis for determining whether food products have been processed under sanitary conditions. They outline the minimum sanitary standards that a food processing facility must meet, including personnel, plant and grounds, sanitary operations, sanitary facilities and controls, equipment and utensils, processes and controls, and warehousing and distribution. They also provide for defect action levels for natural or unavoidable defects that at low levels are not hazardous to health. There may be some instances where a specific GMP task is so important to the safety of the product that it is designated as a preventive control in a food safety plan. This is determined during hazard analysis and most likely would occur if there are cross-contamination in a ready-to-eat food or allergen cross-contact issues that need to be addressed in written sanitation or allergen preventive controls. Chapter 8, Hazard Analysis and Preventive Control Determination, covers this selection process. This chapter focuses on basic GMP requirements. The GMP regulations do not require written procedures, monitoring, or record keeping, except for training records. However, they are recommended as part of a facility's standard operating procedures, SOPs, to manage the GMPs and document the results of these important programs. This can be very helpful to limit the amount of product that may be subject to corrective actions or recalls when an incident occurs. For example, product made from cleanup to cleanup, as reflected in records, defines impacted product for some recalls. Written SOPs are also helpful for employee training. The rest of this module highlights GMPs that are basic to making sure that products are processed under sanitary conditions. Under 21 CFR 117 Subpart A, which pertains to current good manufacturing practice, hazard analysis, and risk-based preventive controls for human food, there are specific employee training requirements outlined. These requirements are crucial for ensuring that all individuals involved in food manufacturing, processing, packing, or holding are adequately trained to perform their duties in a manner that ensures food safety. The key training requirements include awareness of food safety. All employees must receive training or have experience necessary to perform their assigned duties in a manner that ensures the food they manufacture, process, pack, or hold is safe for consumption. Training on personal hygiene. Employees handling food must receive training in the importance of personal cleanliness and good hygienic practices to prevent contamination of food products. Food allergen awareness. If your company handles food allergens, employees must be trained to recognize the major food allergens as required by the Food Allergen Labeling and Consumer Protection Act, FALPA, and understand the significance of preventing cross-contact with allergenic ingredients. Sanitation practices. Training should cover proper sanitation procedures, including cleaning and sanitizing equipment, utensils, and food contact surfaces to prevent contamination. Maintenance of cleanliness. Employees should be trained in maintaining cleanliness in the work environment, including personal workstations and common areas, to minimize the risk of contamination. Record keeping. Individuals responsible for record-keeping tasks must receive training to ensure accurate and timely documentation of critical activities, including monitoring, corrective actions, and verification procedures. Role-specific training. Employees should receive role-specific training tailored to their responsibilities within the food manufacturing, processing, packing, or holding facility. This may include training on operating specific equipment, following standard operating procedures, SOPs, or conducting certain tasks related to food safety. The regulation specifies supervisors are responsible for ensuring compliance must also have appropriate knowledge, training, or experience. These training requirements are essential components of a comprehensive food safety program aimed at preventing foodborne illnesses and ensuring compliance with regulatory standards outlined in 21 CFR 117 Subpart A. Selected GMPs related to personnel practices are listed on the slide above. While we will not go into detail on each of these, a few comments regarding personnel are warranted. Food handlers with vomiting, diarrhea, jaundice, sore throat with fever, wounds, or open lesions could be a source of microbiological contamination that could lead to foodborne illness. Your procedures and practices must make sure that sick people are not around food, and employees must receive training on this. People can also carry potential contaminants into the processing environment. Clothing must be clean. Uniforms, smocks, dedicated footwear, color coding, and other clothing options should be considered depending upon the needs of the operation. Proper hand washing and hand sanitizing when handling ready-to-eat foods is essential to prevent direct contamination, cross-contamination, and allergen cross-contact. This should be done each time employees are away from the workstation. What's wrong with this picture? This is a food handler's hand. Is this okay? The hand is infected with Coxsackie virus, which can live in the human digestive tract and can spread from person to person, usually on unwashed hands. Let's take a look at a few definitions. Contaminated by feces. Direct contamination. Other types of oil seen on hands, for example, are commonly caused by Staphylococcus aureus infection, using which can cause foodborne illness if it grows in food. Unintentional transfer of a pathogen from a food or surface to another food or surface. Allergen cross-contact, unintentional incorporation of a food allergen into a food. GMPs listed above for the plant and grounds help to ensure that the buildings and structures are suitable for food production purposes and to reduce the potential for pathogen recontamination. For example, make sure that the grounds outside the food facility are clean, that there is no standing water, and that waste is collected and disposed of frequently. inside the facility provide adequate space and proper separation for operations, like ensuring separation between cooked and raw product and between food with different allergen profiles, if applicable. Also, make sure that walls, floors, and ceilings are in good repair. It is also important to ensure that condensate does not drip onto in-process product, that there is adequate light for operations, and that any glass is guarded against breakage. As we mentioned, this will not be a comprehensive look at the GMPs, but what I would recommend you do is use these slides or the regulation as a checklist for your GMPs. What's wrong with this picture? Waste disposal and drain area. There is obvious improper waste disposal and drainage issues. Apparently, the exterior drain is clogged with food waste. This type of situation could lead to, and more than likely will lead to, a breeding place for pests. A source of contamination, and is really just downright disgusting. A PCQI should conduct routine inspections of the disposal and drain area. What's wrong with this picture? Ceiling light fixture. I'm sure you can see the broken light bulb in raw material storage area. Perhaps it was hit by a forklift driver with a full load of incoming product. It doesn't appear the bulb is shatter resistant and it's not covered. This could definitely lead to physical contamination of product. A PCQI should be conducting routine inspections to catch things like this. These GMPs cover specific operations needed to keep a plant in good sanitary condition. Making sure that the food facility is in good condition and that any cleaning or storage of chemicals do not contribute to product contamination are important for all food facilities. As pests can be vectors for contamination, they should be prevented from entering the facility. Food contact surfaces need to be cleaned and sanitized as often as necessary to ensure they are not a source of contamination. A brief discussion of the bold provisions on the slide for sanitary operations follows. Toxic chemical storage. Certain potentially toxic chemicals are essential for effective plant operations. Only cleaning and sanitizing chemicals, laboratory testing chemicals, and chemicals needed for plant and equipment maintenance, for example lubricants, may be used or stored in a plant where food is processed or exposed. These chemicals must be properly labeled, used, and stored in a manner that protects food, food contact surfaces, and packaging material from contamination. Store toxic chemicals in a secured area with limited access and separated from food processing areas and areas where food and packaging materials are stored. Follow the label instructions for these chemicals to ensure safe application. Precautions are necessary for application of insecticides and rodenticides. This frequently requires application by a licensed operator. These toxic compounds are generally used only outside of the processing facility unless special precautions are taken. For example, thorough cleaning of all food contact surfaces after application would be necessary if insecticides were used to treat an internal infestation. Pest control. Pests, such as rodents, birds, insects, amphibians, reptiles, and feral or domestic animals must be excluded or controlled in all areas of a food processing or food storage facility. The presence of pests can impact overall sanitation of a facility, so it is important to ensure the effectiveness of pest control. Even if pest control is contracted to an outside company, the facility must assure that there are no pests in the facility. Take measures to exclude pests like eliminating holes that allow entry and remove vegetation or structures that attract or provide a harborage for pests. Proper waste removal reduces the availability of a food source or harborage that can attract pests. What's wrong with this picture? White and brown sugar at a bakery. You must notice the improperly storage of chemicals. Even when properly labeled, these chemicals do not belong in a food preparation area to prevent accidental use in an improper manner. A PCQI or supervisor should be conducting routine inspections as well as ensuring all employees are properly trained to identify and correct issues like this. The Preventive Controls for Human Food regulation requires documentation of sanitation controls for hazards requiring a preventive control in the food safety plan. Only those sanitation procedures that address hazards requiring a preventive control, e.g., sanitation to address environmental pathogens if relevant, must be documented in a food safety plan. This is discussed further in Chapter 11, Sanitation Preventive Controls. Adequate cleaning and sanitizing procedures and frequencies must be established for all food contact surfaces, including equipment, utensils, and food containers. Gloves and uniforms that contact food may also be included in this category. Suggested frequencies for cleaning and sanitizing include before use, after processing interruptions, and as necessary to prevent pathogen growth. Different methods of cleaning may be relevant in different plant environments. Allergen removal requires cleaning but not use of sanitizers. Sanitizing is not intended to have an impact on allergens. Use of water in dry processing areas is discouraged because it can infiltrate cracks, crevices, and difficult-to-clean areas, establishing potential harborage sites for environmental pathogens. Wet processing environments typically use detergent and potable water at a suitable temperature for cleaning, followed by sanitizing with a sanitizer that is registered for food contact surface applications, such as chlorine, quaternary ammonium, or iodine-based compounds. Follow manufacturers' use instructions to ensure efficacy and regulatory compliance. Sanitation of non-food contact surfaces. As discussed above, sanitation of non-food contact surfaces is needed in most facilities to eliminate potential food sources for pests. For facilities that make ready-to-eat products that are exposed to the environment prior to packaging, cleaning and sanitizing of certain non-food contact surfaces may be included as a sanitation preventive control in a food safety plan to minimize the potential for finished product contamination with environmental pathogens. This is discussed further in Chapter 11, Sanitation Preventive Controls. Additional information on general cleaning and sanitation is discussed in Appendix 5, Sanitation Basics, including information on potential spread of contamination by inappropriate use of high-pressure hoses through creation of aerosols. What's wrong with this picture? Cleaning and sanitation. As you can see, he is working quite diligently cleaning the facility. However, apron cleaning on the floor and over a floor drain is a potential contamination source. The employee is focused on cleaning but needs training on potential sources of contamination. A PCQI or supervisor should be routinely inspected the areas, as well as ensuring all employees have appropriate training to carry out their duties in a safe and sanitary manner. Sanitary facilities and controls include the water supply, plumbing, sewage disposal, toilet facilities, hand washing facilities, and trash and waste disposal. A brief discussion of the water supply and plumbing, as well as toilet and hand washing facilities, follows. Water and ice that contacts food, food contact surfaces, and food packaging material must be of safe and adequate sanitary quality. The source of water and the plumbing system that conveys it to the building must provide a safe supply. In many regions, the Water Treatment Authority is responsible for ascertaining the safety of the water source and conveyance to the building. In these situations, a company's documentation should include annual water quality tests from the Water Authority. Facilities using private water systems, e.g., wells, are directly responsible for adequate monitoring and documentation of the safety of the water source. Municipalities in many regions can provide guidance. Ice must be made with potable water and protected from contamination with the same care used for food when ice contacts food or food contact surfaces. The temperature and pressure of water must be suitable for the facility's use. For example, hot water may be needed for effective cleaning and sanitizing. To ensure water is safe, cross-connections between potable and non-potable water lines must be prevented. There must be no cross-connection or backflow potential between the water supply and piping for wastewater or sewage. Developed regions typically have mature water safety programs, while developing regions may not have uniform delivery of safe drinking water. Potential hazards and controls must be considered for those regions. What's wrong with this picture? Warewashing sink. A leaking faucet would fail to meet several of the requirements outlined. Adequate water supply. A leaking faucet could compromise the adequacy of the water supply for operations. Leaks can lead to reduced water pressure, which may not be sufficient for various food processing tasks or for ensuring proper sanitation. Additionally, if the leak is severe, it could potentially lead to water wastage, further impacting the adequacy of the water supply. Safe and sanitary water. Water from a leaking faucet may not be safe or of adequate sanitary quality. Leaks can introduce contaminants into the water supply, compromising its safety. Moreover, stagnant water resulting from leaks can become a breeding ground for bacteria, further compromising its sanitary quality. Suitable temperature and pressure. A leaking faucet may fail to provide running water at a suitable temperature and under adequate pressure. Temperature control is crucial for tasks such as washing food and sanitizing equipment. A leak could disrupt the ability to maintain the desired temperature. Additionally, reduced water pressure from a leak may hinder the effectiveness of cleaning processes, as certain equipment and utensils may require adequate pressure to remove food residues effectively. In summary, a leaking faucet poses significant risks to food safety, sanitation, and operational efficiency, thereby failing to meet the specified requirements. Not to mention the open holes are a source for potential contamination. Here's another important definition you should know. Potable water, water that meets the standards for drinking purposes of the state or local authority having jurisdiction, or water that meets the standards prescribed by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's National Primary Drinking Water Regulations, 40 CFR 141. Employees, even those who are healthy, can carry and shed human pathogens that can be transmitted through food, thus hand washing and sanitary toilet facilities are essential for food safety. Each establishment must provide hand washing facilities designed to ensure that an employee's hands are not a source of contamination of food, food contact surfaces, or food packaging materials, by providing facilities that are adequate, convenient, and furnish running water at a suitable temperature. Hand washing and, where appropriate, hand sanitizing facilities should be at each location where good sanitary practice requires their use. Effective hand hygiene training should be accompanied by available hand washing supplies that remove food soils from hands, e.g., soap, running water. Hand washing signs are useful reminders. Water at a comfortable temperature must be available, and single-use towels or suitable drying devices should be provided to prevent recontamination. Wet hands are more prone to spread contamination than dry hands. An adequate sewage disposal system is required. Readily accessible toilet facilities must be maintained in sanitary condition and not be a source of contamination. Toilet facilities should have self-closing doors that do not open into processing areas. Additionally, toilet facilities should be in good repair, e.g., not leaking, and should be properly supplied with personal hygiene products, including hand washing supplies. What's wrong with this picture? Employee toilet facilities. It's obvious the bathroom is inadequately cleaned. A toilet facility soiled in this manner may be, and more than likely will be, a source of contamination for both bacterial and viral pathogens that can aerosolize when the toilet is flushed. The PCQI or supervisor should be regularly inspecting the toilet facilities to ensure it is up to the appropriate standards. Employees should also be trained to identify and correct these type of issues. What's wrong with this picture? Hand washing sink. Dedicated hand washing sink. The hand sink must be solely dedicated to hand washing purposes in a food facility. By using the hand washing sink to store a colander, the sink becomes unavailable for its intended purpose, increasing the risk of improper hand hygiene practices. Improper usage. The hand washing sink should not be utilized for any other purpose besides hand washing to prevent cross-contamination and ensure hygiene standards. Storing a colander in the hand sink indicates a disregard for proper sanitation practices and compromises the cleanliness of the sink. Colander contamination. Using the hand sink to store a colander introduces the risk of contamination to the colander itself. Any residue present in the sink or splashes from hand washing activities can transfer onto the colander, potentially contaminating food items that come into contact with it during food preparation. Unsanitary soap. The presence of a bar of soap in the food facility's hand sink is unsanitary and unacceptable. Bar soap can harbor bacteria and other contaminants, posing a risk to food safety if used by food handlers. Liquid soap dispensers should be used instead to promote hygienic hand washing practices. In summary, using the hand washing sink to store a colander and the presence of unsanitary bar soap in the sink indicate violations of proper hygiene protocols and pose risks to food safety in the facility. Equipment, including utensils, must be designed to be adequately cleaned and maintained in a sanitary condition. For example, food contact surfaces must be made of corrosion-resistant and non-toxic materials to prevent adulteration. Seams should have smooth welds to ensure cleanability. Also, compressed air introduced into food must be treated so that it does not contain adulterants and be properly filtered to prevent particles from getting into food. Cooling equipment, such as freezers and coolers, must be equipped with temperature-indicating devices, such as thermometers or chart recorders. Automatic temperature control or an alarm system helps to ensure that the proper temperatures are maintained. Thermometers and similar equipment must be accurate, close to the correct measure, precise, appropriately narrow plus or minus range, and maintained. Processes and controls used for food must ensure that the food remains suitable for human consumption. This provision covers general and more specific requirements for raw materials, ingredients, and manufacturing operations. Take adequate precautions to ensure that procedures do not contribute to allergen cross-contact or contamination from any source, and minimize the potential for microbial growth. When food is adulterated, it usually must be rejected. FDA may allow the food to be treated or processed to eliminate contamination. See 21 CFR 117.80A6. Appropriate quality control procedures are required to assure success. Some tasks may require special attention. For example, overall sanitation of the facility must be supervised by qualified individuals who understand what it takes to maintain appropriate sanitary conditions in a food facility. Raw materials must be free from pests, extraneous material, e.g., string, plastic, metal, etc., and undesirable microorganisms. You are responsible for assuring this using whatever techniques are appropriate for the material and your source of supply. Raw materials must be inspected for suitability. They must be stored and handled to prevent contamination, e.g., properly packaged, and deterioration, e.g., appropriate time, temperature, and humidity conditions. This also applies to thawing. If you use rework, ensure that it is properly identified, stored, and handled to prevent contamination, allergen cross-contact, and deterioration. What's wrong with this picture? Poly bags containing of pita chips. In the picture you see the pita chips may become and probably will be contaminated because of numerous holes in the poly bags. Food products must be stored in containers that protect the product from contamination. A PCQI or supervisor should be routinely inspecting the floor in an effort to find and correct issues like this. Employees should also be trained to identify and correct these type of scenarios too. All manufacturing operations must be conducted to minimize microbial growth. Pasteurizing, freezing, and refrigerating are food processing methods that may be used to prevent spoilage and ensure safety of certain food products. The extent to which these are used depends on the particular product and its distribution. When used, these processes must be done in a manner that ensures the conditions are adequate to maintain product safety and prevent deterioration, including use of time and temperature combinations that kill pathogens of concern for pasteurization, and that prevent the growth of microorganisms during cooling and refrigeration and freezing processes. Rapid cooling or further processing without delay of blanched foods is necessary to prevent microbial growth. Certain bacteria, called thermophiles, thermo equals heat, phile equals loving, can grow at hot temperatures. Minimize thermophilic growth through proper temperature and timely cleaning. Certain moist foods such as batters, breading, sauces, gravies, and stuffing can support rapid growth of microorganisms. Protect these from contamination through good quality ingredients, heat treatment, time/temperature controls, and physical protection such as covers. Conversely, dry foods that depend on reduced water activity to control microbial growth, discussed in Chapter 4, Biological Food Safety Hazards, must have parameters, e.g., soluble solid/water ratio or water activity, monitored to assure that growth is controlled, and must be protected from moisture pickup. Factors that influence microbial growth are discussed in Chapter 4, Biological Food Safety Hazards. Clean and sanitize equipment, utensils, and finished product containers as necessary to ensure sanitary conditions. This may require disassembly of equipment to facilitate cleaning. Ice is a common ingredient for many operations. If made in-house, use potable water and produce it in a sanitary manner. Ice machines, like other food processing equipment, must be cleaned and sanitized periodically. Finished or in-process food must be protected from contamination by raw materials or refuse. This includes exposed food on conveyors in the ambient environment, as well as in freezers and coolers. Use of sieves, traps, magnets, and metal detectors can be useful to prevent inclusion of metal and extraneous material, or to detect metal if such contamination does occur. Destruction and reconditioning operations should not serve as sources of contamination, and methods used should be shown to be effective. Sanitary conditions apply not only to manufacturing areas, but also to warehousing and distribution. Microbial growth must be prevented. Allergen cross-contact must be prevented. GMPs require that food is protected from biological, chemical, including radiological, and physical hazards, as well as from deterioration during warehousing and distribution. Food companies often send unusable food or byproduct materials to the animal food supply chain. Food may be unsaleable to humans for quality or safety reasons, but could be safe or made safe for animals to consume. Byproducts might be sent to animal feed converters, manufacturers, or wholesalers, or directly to animal producers that may feed it directly to animals or, if necessary, process the food to mitigate any hazards. Human food and byproducts held and sent to the animal food supply chain in general are not subject to the requirements for hazard analysis and risk-based preventive controls for animals, but must comply with specific holding and distribution GMPs to keep the byproduct safe, 21 CFR 117.95 and 21 CFR 507.28. For example, containers used to hold animal food before distribution need to be constructed of appropriate material, cleaned and maintained to prevent them from contaminating the byproducts. Byproducts must also be held in a way that prevents contamination from trash and garbage, e.g., employee lunches, maintenance department debris. Use of color-coded containers to designate the contents, e.g., for trash versus for human food byproducts going to the animal food supply chain, may be useful. Additionally, byproducts must be labeled on the container or shipping documents with the common or usual name, such as cereal food fines for particles of breakfast cereals obtained as a byproduct of their processing. See AAFCO in additional reading. Note that if a human food manufacturer also processes the byproduct materials, e.g., drying, pelleting, grinding, they must comply with the preventive controls for animal food regulation in 21 CFR Part 507. These companies should consider participating in the FSPCA course for animal food. Even when produced under GMPs, some foods contain natural or unavoidable defects that do not present a hazard to health. The FDA set these action levels because it is economically impractical to grow, harvest, or process raw products that are totally free of non-hazardous, naturally occurring, unavoidable defects. FDA establishes maximum levels for these defects and will use these levels when deciding whether to recommend regulatory action. The manufacturer is still responsible for managing these defects and trying to keep them to the lowest level currently feasible. For example, a few pit fragments in pitted dates, olives, and prunes may be considered unavoidable even under GMPs. Mixing of food containing defects above the defect action level with another lot of food with low levels is not permitted. The entire batch would be considered adulterated regardless of the level present. In addition to GMPs, other common prerequisite programs include hygienic zoning, supplier and product specifications, preventive maintenance, special signage, e.g., allergen icons, or color-coded equipment, e.g., a special color for waste material containers, and other programs specific to the operation. Hygienic zoning. Hygienic zoning is useful to reduce the potential spread of pathogens in facilities that manufacture ready-to-eat (RTE) products. For example, areas of the facility that handle the raw ingredient, e.g., raw peanuts, may have less stringent expectations for hygiene than those handling the RTE product, e.g., roasted peanuts. Zoning typically involves separation of, for example, cooked product from raw product, and may include different uniforms for cooked side and raw side employees, dedicated equipment, e.g., carts or forklifts, for different zones, traffic flow and airflow considerations, etc. Hygienic zoning is discussed further in Appendix 6, Hygienic Zoning and Environmental Monitoring Supplemental Information. Some elements of hygienic zoning may be a preventive control as determined through the hazard analysis process. Purchasing and manufacturing specifications. Written specifications for the products you produce and the processes you use to make them, as well as ingredient and packaging materials, are common in business transactions. Well-written specifications help to ensure that expectations are understood by both the customer and the supplier. This is particularly important for ingredients that have a history of association with foodborne hazards. Efforts should be made to know your suppliers, such as learning about their facilities and practices and the safety and quality of their products. Buying ingredients on the open market without knowledge of the supplier's food safety practices or program can add risk to your operation. Written ingredient and packaging material specifications should be developed for all suppliers, and verification of compliance with those specifications is recommended for ingredient classes that have a history of contamination. Adherence to the specification is commonly confirmed through the use of a letter of continuing guarantee or a certificate of analysis (COA) that verifies the ingredient or product meets specifications. Chapter 4, Biological Food Safety Hazards, and Chapter 5, Chemical, Physical and Economically Motivated Food Safety Hazards review some ingredients that have a history of outbreaks associated with specific foodborne hazards. Periodic reviews of the supplier's product against ingredient specification requirements should be an element of supply chain programs. Use of a third-party auditing firm that reviews the supplier's food safety program is one way to verify that controls are in place at the supplier. The extent to which controls are used should be risk-based and consistent with regulatory requirements. Chapter 12, Supply Chain Programs, provides more detail on requirements when hazards requiring a preventive control are addressed by a supplier. Others specific to the operation. Some organizations develop detailed procedures that may also be considered prerequisite programs. These may include receiving, storage and shipping procedures, labeling and label review, ingredient handling practices, glass control, visitor control, etc. The impact of these programs on food safety can be considered during the hazard analysis process. For example, labeling foods that contain food allergens is a preventive control that must be included in the food safety plan, but label review for other information may be a prerequisite program. Similarly, glass control programs may be a prerequisite program for facilities that do not pack in glass containers. However, preventive controls would be required if glass containers are used in a facility. Finally, there are a number of requirements that are outside of the scope of the preventive controls for human food regulation and may not be related to these regulations. These, however, are regulatory requirements under other programs, and processors should be aware of these requirements as they may need to be included in their overall food safety program. For example, seafood products are not subject to the preventive controls for human food regulation but are subject to GMPs and the seafood HACCP regulation. Good manufacturing practices and other prerequisite programs must be in place to provide a solid foundation for your food safety plan. These programs establish the foundation for effectively implementing your food safety system. GMPs are required by regulations, and most elements are managed as prerequisite programs outside of your food safety plan. GMPs are operationalized by workers, frequently through written SOPs. The course provided a brief overview of GMPs. Because all GMPs are required, additional training or in-depth reading of the GMP regulations is important to ensure that the specific requirements are addressed. This course cannot discuss all prerequisite programs in detail. Depending on the product or business, there may be additional programs to consider and implement. Keep on moving. Great job finishing the lecture. Make sure to review all the chapter resources and complete all activities and exercises.